Welcome to another show. Today's guest, I'm excited for today. Today's guest is a West Point grad, former Green Beret, multifamily operator, and also the founder and CEO of Sportsmen for Warriors. So with that, welcome Ben Bateman.
Hey Kyle, thanks for having me on the show this morning.
Hey Ben, hey, it's good to have you here. Appreciate you joining me. Would you mind just taking a minute to talk a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I think you kind of hit on it. So my wife and I are both West Point grads, served in combat. I led troops in combat, both as a conventional Army officer and a Special Force officer. Um, Transitioned out of the military, worked at Goldman Sachs for a year, and then had the opportunity to found and run the nonprofit, but kind of had missed a calling. And there was a rapid growth in the nonprofit space. So kind of missed the national security space, rise of ISIS. And so I continued running the nonprofit full time as a additional duty in addition to having 4 kids. Went and worked at Los Alamos National Lab, and then in the free time, my wife and I flipped homes, and COVID happened. The world changed, made us refocus, repurpose what we want to do in life, and we've transitioned to multifamily investing and still giving back to the veteran community through the nonprofit, and continue to grow. We're in a joint venture on a multifamily unit in Alaska. We're currently selling our current live-in flip, moving to Texas, and continuing to grow our multifamily investment portfolio.
Awesome. That I'm interested in learning more about your real estate journey. I definitely want to get into that. I'd like to talk a little bit about what you served, and thank you for your service. I'm not really familiar with the military. It's not something that I've ever been really a part of, but I'm always intrigued to hear about it, hear people's stories. And I saw kind of your bio, and I went and actually watched. I just finished watching the movie 12 Strong.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're familiar with that movie at all, but
I am. I actually know through a friend of a friend, the guy Mark Nooch, the guy portrayed by Chris Hemsworth. So yeah, and then I was fortunate enough at the time I have a couple of the horse soldier statues, the tribute to the Special Operation Forces, predominantly Green Berets that went in right after 9/11 into Afghanistan. So yeah, I've read that book. But yeah, so there's multiple aspects of, and again, it kind of goes into like the whole leadership. So I'm a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, the oldest leadership school, oldest really military academy in the school, or military academy, obviously in the United States, but one of the oldest in the world. And then I was a freshman there when 9/11, so everything changed on that day. And then all my classmates and I, we knew we were going to war. And then I was on spring break when we invaded Iraq, and we knew, like, man, this is gonna be a long entrenched battle. I specialized. I'm not a linguist, but when I went Special Forces and at West Point, you have to take a foreign language, and so I picked Arabic. And just kind of like growing up, we'd spend a lot of battles, a lot of time, a lot of energy in the Middle East, and I just kind of guesstimated that it would continue to be a hotbed, which it continues to get more and more focus, whether it's through economic policy, whether it's through domestic foreign policy, whatever. It's a place that's going to be impacting and shaping world events for the next long period of time. I mean, as equal, the Middle East is obviously a very diverse and mixed place, but it's equal importance when you lump it together as like Russia or China or some of the other hotbeds in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's definitely no doubt about that. You talk about leadership and your passionate about leadership. I think that movie, I don't know how accurate it is as far as true what actually happened, but as far as I think I enjoy the movie, and I think it was like is it Mitch Nelson, the Captain Mitch Nelson? Is that who Chris Hemsworth plays in the movie?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I think the character, he just exemplifies like what leadership is, and like in the middle of chaos, making decisions and charging ahead. So, do you mind just talking a little bit about like leadership, what that means to you, and why
Yeah.
you're passionate about that?
Yeah. So, leadership, obviously being a leader in the military kind of like shaped everything, the schools, the experiences I did. But I remember General Hal Moore, who, if you've read the book or seen the movie We Were Soldiers, portrayed by Mel Gibson, that's he ended up retiring. He was a battalion commander then, leading a battalion, an infantry battalion in Ia Drang in Vietnam War. And he came and talked to my class, um, like my sophomore, maybe junior, senior year at West Point. And I remember he always talked about there's always one more thing you can be doing. And I think that fundamentally kind of shaped the whole, because combat is chaos, right? There's myriad of things going on, but if you can do one more thing, and then you can do one more thing, and I think that's kind of how a lot of experience of life and leadership's hard because like I had a 40-person element that I led, straight out of college or after my initial training. I deployed 6 months later to Iraq, and I was there. I was the senior guy on the ground in a lot of situations. And so, everybody has their opinion. Everyone wants to do, let's go left, let's go right, let's run up, same as sports, like if I'm the quarterback, it's, am I going to run the play? Am I going to pass? Or am I going to do an audible based on whatever defense I see? And, with leadership, you have to be able to make those decisions. And oftentimes it's a very lonely place. But when you're honest, humble, you teach, you go to your subordinates or direct reports for advice, but at the end of the day, you have to make the decision, and then you have to adjust the decision. And the important part of leadership, I think, is enforcing people that they plan and they try to think through all the potential situations of, all right, we're supposed to go out on a 24-hour mission. What happens if we're out for 72 hours? Or like if we have a decision whether we walk or we ride in Humvees or up armored vehicles, right? There's constant risk and reward playoff that you're using, and how do you mitigate those risks? So all those factors are leadership. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people with similar backgrounds as me say this, leadership is leading people, management is managing processes, managing resources, i.e. like I'm not leading the amount of ammo I have, I'm leading the troops who are carrying the ammo, but I manage that resource, and it's something that it's tracked and then it's needed. And just like in a multifamily experience, if there's a problem that comes up, right, it's leadership to identify the problem, come up with a solution, and then have that hard conversation with the other investors or the rest of the team and say, hey, here's the path forward and here's why, right? But behind the scenes, as the leader, you're going to talk to the finance person, the attorneys, um, the GC, whoever it is, and coming up with that solution beforehand, and then coming up with a proposed. Am I going to come up with everything? No, but you have to kind of come up with a plan and see your vision, and go to others and kind of ask them those hard questions and ask them, what's it going to be like? What's your thoughts? How should we go? Should we go left? Should we go right? Should we run the ball? Should we pass? Should we take an eight? Whatever the situation or environment kind of dictates, is you adjust to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love how you tie that into multifamily investing, kind of that leadership role. I think a part of being a leader for me is being able to one skill I love to be better at is to be able to communicate a vision and sell a vision and get people to kind of jump on board with that. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Do you think leadership is something that people are kind of, it's just natural, like they're born with it, or do you think leadership is something that people can develop over time?
I think there's both. I think some people have certain characteristics that might make them a good leader initially, right? Like me, I'm an introvert, right? So it's hard. It was harder for me to kind of jump out like as a cadet and just being in those positions. But you grow over time and you change and I think this kind of goes back to the whole outside the box thinking, like based on like if you compare apples to apples, right? Like your experience, my experience, right? Like I've led people in combat. I've survived multiple firefights. Like my reaction to that, my box is bigger than yours in that situation. Just based on experiences, environment, nature versus nurture type of thing. But if you had 1,000 multifamily units and I'm a JV in a 30 unit, like my box in that space is much smaller. So it's just continuing to push your boundaries, continue to expand, grow your knowledge, grow your experience, and a lot of that stuff you have to do in order to get better, right? Like if you want to, if your weakness, you're coming into a multifamily experience and your weakness is, you want to do developments and your weakness is reading blueprints, find time, find some of the engineers that you're working with, get a set of prints and just go over it and ask the million questions and then just keep growing and keep expanding and then go out, if you're not a lot of construction experience, go spend time on the ground on the sites, like get to know the people, and that's where you can tie in leadership, right? Like be no do, be the example, know who you are, know the people you're working with, and then always do the right thing, right? Like when hard stuff comes up, when those challenges come up, do what you feel your moral compass tells you to do, right? So whether that's having to talk to other investors and do another capital call, or how you structure your deal, where maybe you don't put as much money in, or the GP team doesn't put as much money into the deal because they keep that as a reserve so they won't have to do capital calls, right? Like whatever that, and again, each experience in life, right? Like my leadership, if I were working in financial services, would be slightly different. And again, it's based on, you have to adjust when you're leading people. You have to adjust to that individual person, right? Like I'm an introvert, so if you praised me publicly, it's not going to be the same versus if you pulled me aside and said, "Hey Ben, it was really great what you did back there. I liked how you came up with that solution to mitigate the water issue or the client issue or whatever X example is." Um, it's knowing those simple things and then knowing the people, knowing their drive, what drives them, what they want to do long term, and how when you're fortunate enough to be in that person's life for that moment, like how do you make them better? Me as a goal, I always wanted to make everybody understand and be able to like basically create my own replacements, because if I'm doing my job and creating the next replacements, at the same time, I should be learning what my boss does and how everything ties together so that we can optimize and make things better.
Yeah, I think it's important for a leader to be able to also follow and be able to you know go and ask the right questions too, because like nobody has all the answers, right? There's always someone else
That's right.
that will probably have the answers that we don't. So I think that's very important. I like your switching gears a little bit. Your IG Instagram bio says, "I have one life to live and must make the most of it." So yeah, I love that. I think you've accomplished a lot, and I know that you're not done yet. But yeah, just talk about that a little bit, what that means to you and what that's important to you.
Yeah, I think based on your experience, and I think a lot of this comes from like the nonprofit, and like I had setbacks, right? Like I lost two of my soldiers in combat, right? Like it was a huge setback, but you can look at it from, at least in my opinion, you can look at this in two ways. Like you can armchair quarterback yourself, and you can live in regret. And this is one of the principles that we teach when we take other warriors out on the nonprofit, is like, yeah, okay, you went right, right? Like your choice was go left, go right, and maybe you made that decision and you lost one of your soldiers, but you don't know what would have happened if you went left. And so you could just like, I still, I still think about the guys I lost. I mean, my oldest son is named after the two soldiers I lost, and so like I say their name every day. And so like I just try to be a better version of myself each day and just incrementally get better, whether it's in multifamily, whether it's as a father, whether it's as a husband, whether it's as a citizen, whatever it is, like how can I be better today? And you continue to live your life and move forward. Yeah, we have setbacks, or to quote Rocky, right? Like life's not about how hard you can uh, get hit, but it's like you can get hit and get up and keep moving forward, right? Like that's it's life on. Everyone's gonna have setbacks. Everyone's gonna have stumbles, but it's what you do in those times, and like how you keep moving forward, right? Like putting in plenty of offers, LOIs on multifamily places that have been rejected. What do I do? Do I stop? Do I let that impact me? No, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep pushing forward. I'm going to keep researching, keep finding better ways. How can I optimize? How build relationships so I can have, whether it's more investors or more access to capital, or through like relationships with local credit unions or bridge lenders, or anything that's going to make my GP team or whatever organization I'm working with better, and just keep going from that. So yeah, it's one life, and how we live it might shape the I'm a devout Christian, so it might shape my longer term, right? Like yeah, it might only be one life, but if that can shape eternity, then I'm going to make decisions and do the right thing. So I don't have to remember things, right? Like I always say, I'm not smart enough to be a pathological liar, because those people to be successful have to remember all their lies, versus me. Like I just try to do the right thing all the time, and then that way I don't have to try to remember everything.
Yeah, I love that. Being having nothing to hide and just
Yeah,
being yourself. Like there's a powerful feeling, right? So
yeah, it is. Yeah.
I like to. Um, so I love what you're doing for veterans. Would you mind just sharing what it exactly is Sportsmen for Warriors? What does
Yeah.
that
So
organization do?
we're a nonprofit. We focus on enriching, engaging, and educating our warriors. So it's everything from, we primarily use the outdoors, so hunting, fishing, recreational activities, sports as well. Um, that's kind of like the excuse to get the warriors out. So we're 100% off of nominations and donations, whether it's somebody donates a hunting trip or a fishing trip, or a warrior gets nominated, and then we have to go out and find that kind of activity, and then we kind of go back and we shape it, right? So like if to use me as an example, right? Like I was in Iraq from October 2006 to December 2007. I was in Ramadi, Iraq, which is out west. If a person nominated me, I would try to go and find, okay, I'm an Army guy, and I'm an officer, but let's just say Army Ramadi 2006, 2007. I'm going to then, so as the organization, we're going to try to go out and find, okay, let's find a similar person to Ben, because I might only have 24 hours with the person. That for me or the team, which is predominantly people who've been through the program, it's helped shape their lives. We call those individuals warrior ambassadors. So they've been through the program, it fundamentally impacted their life, and they want to give back through taking other warriors on events and helping out. And so like we try to gear it up as much as possible, because again we have a short timeline, and we're trying to get from, and to reference I typically compare this to dating, to go from like very first date with a person to, I'm gonna have a very, very serious conversation, like how many kids do I want? Is there a future with this person? All these, like deep conversations, but except in that, it's like, okay, here's the issue that's been bothering me the most, and it's post-traumatic stress, or it's traumatic brain injury, or it's a combination, or it's just adapting to the transition from being a active duty service member to being a civilian again, and right, and like issues or challenges might come along with that. Um, and so just trying to put an individual package together for each person so that we can help them and give America back a better product. And then identifying, going back to that whole leadership, just like we did in the military, right? We would counsel somebody like, hey, you failed the physical fitness challenge. Okay, let's come up with a plan, 30-day plan, 60-day plan, 90-day plan of how we're going to remediate this issue. And it's kind of the same thing. Like, okay, you went back home. Okay, you haven't been successful having job interviews. What's the common thing that they're saying? Oh, it's I need a bachelor's degree. Okay, well, let's come up with a plan of how you're going to do that. Or, um, and then, or like I think a lot of people don't realize, like with post-traumatic stress and other kind of mental challenges, you can subconsciously not say something, right? So like you might be interviewing me for a job, and you're like, man, Ben has every question right, but there's just something off because I might be subconsciously projecting that there's something that's holding me back, and you're not sure what it is. You might leave the interview and be like, he hasn't been answered everything right, has all the qualifications, there's just something off. So if we can help fix that person, we can help fix that issue, then they can go to the interview and do well. And obviously part of the stigma is there's a very high suicide rate in veterans, a little bit higher than national average. And so if we can cut down on that, like we didn't start out to like save marriages, but those are second, third order effects that come out of that. Like we want our warriors to be functioning members of the community. We want our warriors to find that next purpose or that next kind of mission, or Simon Sinek says, find your why, and then continue to go forward and grow and give back. So like for me, if say hypothetically my thing is coaching little league football, I want people to know like, yeah, eventually get to the point that I'm a veteran and I serve my country, but I want them to like use that as a positive, not like as a negative side effect of like, oh yeah, Ben this way because of veteran versus, oh man, that's awesome. Ben's not only teaching, kind of like Coach K, who's a West Point grad, one of the winningest basketball coaches. He played at West Point, and he coached at West Point, and obviously ended up at Duke, and he's been a very prolific winning coach for the U.S. Men's basketball team, right? Like the same thing, like teaching more than just football, like teaching life skills, all those things, all married into one.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. And I'm now very intrigued because I'm into big game hunting, especially like Western big game hunting, elk hunting, and all that. So
Yeah.
Is that something that you've done?
Yeah. So we've taken multiple people on elk hunts, deer hunts, antelope hunts. We've cage dived with great whites. We've taken a lot of people fishing, Alaska, Florida, Texas, San Diego, California. So each thing's kind of custom tailored, but there's something healing about like being in the outdoors, being away from everything, and then that's where those relationships can happen. That's where you have those bonfire talks and people like break down and realize like I've grown tremendously as a person. I've grown tremendously as a leader. Just have these conversations with others, and having that humility to talk about it. Like and as the person that's there, they really have to have like a very strong emotional intelligence and like empathy for the others, and then it's balancing, right? Like so say if I went out on a enrichment with another warrior, and um, their thing is like they left the wire just a couple, went outside, left the wire a couple times, and on one of those I got hit by an ID. Like I need to tailor how I handle that, because you can cause people to shut down, you can have negative reactions on those things. So it's like, all right, I can't just go like, here's what it's like with ambushed, here's X, here's Y, and like how do we adjust, how do we overcome from that. But the focus isn't on me. My focus is I'm telling these stories to get this warrior to open up, so that then they can start talking and we can help come up with a plan for that person.
Mm-hmm. I actually this past summer I was at a total archery challenge. Are you familiar with that? What
I'm
that is?
not.
It's an archery shoot. I think it's kind of they have like events all over the country. But I just reason I bring it up is I met some veterans there that there was also an organization that gives back to veterans, and they had set them up with bows, and I thought that was so cool to see that the guys that like they never really done archery before, and they were out there like having fun and having the time of their lives. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's awesome that you give back
Wow.
to veterans like that. So.
Yeah, and that's also a skill set, right? Like the whole like teach a man to fish, you feed him, or give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. It's the same thing, right? Like teaching these people archery, like that's a skill set, and it's a passion that person might fall in love with, and they make decisions based on like, oh, I can go down X path or I can go down Y path. If I go down Y path, I can go archery. I can spend time in the outdoors. I can teach this to my children. Yeah, so there's no one right answer. That's the thing. There's no one pill that solves all the world's problems, but it's coming up with an individual focus and truly shaping um, others so that they can be the better versions of themselves.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we've gone like close to half an hour. We haven't even gotten started on real estate yet. I don't know how long you have. Do you have a hard stop?
I don't know.
Okay, I'd like to get into that a little bit. I'm curious what was your reason for kind of making that transition from, and I guess you're still doing flips, right? Live and flip and
Yeah,
you live in,
yeah.
what kind
So,
of made you decide to get into multifamily?
so I've been around kind of a further background. I didn't really talk about in the introduction. I've been around construction like my entire life. So my earliest memories were spending time in heavy equipment with my father, and then he was a heavy equipment operator. He started his own construction company, and then he was a GC or general contractor working doing the developments both on the residential and multifamily side for the developers. And then as I got older, I watched. I was a teenager when he started, and then in high school I'd run projects over the summer so he could focus on other like growing the business, doing all kind of like the big picture stuff. And then met my wife at West Point. We got stationed at Fort Carson together, bought our first house, and during the housing bubble, right? So we bought a house, value went up, kept going up, and then when the Army, when we did it's called PCS or permanent change of station, based on because I was going special forces, I had to go to training. I got moved, and it just so happened that like the housing bubble had started like in my neighborhood. I think probably 50 to 60 homes that were sold were like 50 to 60% of homes were either short sales or foreclosures. And so like I learned a tremendous amount. We rented that for a while, and we learned a lot about the house. We learned important aspects of that. And then fast forward a couple of years, my wife was stationed separately for almost 2 years. um, when we got back together was 2011, and the housing market hadn't really uh, stabilized, and so that's when we started flipping houses. And the great thing, they had this program called the VA Vendy. It was a 5% down, a VA foreclosure. You could buy it for 5% down, and priority went to military veterans. And so we started flipping houses in North Carolina, just outside Fayetteville, and we were doing all the work ourselves. And we just like we loved it, both because like we could take things and make them better, which is a big kind of um, push for my wife and I, and also like we can make things financially. So we did flips, we had rentals, and then fast forward, um, just continuing to learn and grow in the real estate space is what pushed me into the multifamily space. I mean, everything from tax breaks to just scalability, right? Like having, unless you buy like a build to rent type of single family homes, like say if you're in, I don't know, if you're in say Dallas, Texas, right? Like it's a very giant MSA to have. If you want to have like a place where you can truly scale and continue to grow your ability, like you're gonna have to build a community if you're doing single family homes. Otherwise, you're gonna have one here, one here, one here. And I'm a hands-on person. I want to go check on the property, see, and, and make sure that they're, everything's right. Identify potential issues. Just kind of like uh, understand like the operational environment of those homes, right? Like if the person across the street comes in and doesn't take care of their yard, and you're in a nice community, that's going to have a negative impact on you. So like understanding those other factors, and truly it's just like a way to scale, right? Like multifamily, yeah, I could buy one house here, one house here, one house there here, but I can buy a fourplex. Well, that's still residential, but say a fiveplex. Now we're in commercial. Now it's a different environment. But now I've got five people when we run the systems right that will be paying the mortgages versus one here and one there, and it's just a. And then when you look at cost efficiencies and everything, you're scaling because say what we like to do is value add, right? Like uh, so coming in, fixing up, renovating the property, kind of similar to what we're doing with the flips, and then making it a better product, a safer product for our tenants. But if if say 100 units and I've got a 2-year plan, right? Like what's that work out to? 5 units a month, roughly, crayon math. And so, or 4 to 5. You're looking at if I can go to a general contractor and say, hey, I can keep two of your crews busy for the next 2 years, right? I'm going to get a better deal versus if I'm just doing one single family home a month or one single family home every 3 months or whatever it takes. It's scalability, and then it's a much longer game, and it's just real. Our country's tax laws are structured, and I'm not an accountant, I'm not a lawyer, so please don't take my stuff to heart, but or do your own research. But there's our tax laws are set up where there's a benefit for being a real estate investor.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. That's why kind of why I decided to get into that multifamily. You
Yeah,
mentioned that you're are you a GP or an LP on that Anchorage property?
I'm a GP.
GP.
Yeah, so I've LP'd in into multifamily and self storage, but I want to GP more deals. Just where again to use a football analogy, like I'm the quarterback. I want you to give me the ball. I can work through all the chaos, and I'll get the ball in the end zone, or I'll fail, and I'll take responsibility for why I failed.
Awesome. Would you mind just talking a little bit about that deal, like I guess kind of the general like high overview of the property and
Yeah,
how
so
the deal worked out?
it's a 30 unit property in Anchorage, Alaska. It's Anchorage wasn't on my list, but it's a myriad of things, right? Like being on the new side, you want to work with smart people, and the initial team that was on it, um, they reckon. Well, it's two. So there's some senior people because we had the KP that had to sign because the person who found this deal didn't have the 2 years experience that the agency debt required to sign on the bottom line. But he recognized that like this is an opportunity where we can get a bunch of people together. They can start their clock, and then they can learn from others, right? So like my my background that's helping is on the construction side, but and I've ran big multi-million dollar construction projects. I did that at Los Alamos, and then but I've never been like a property manager. So it's just for me, it's continuing to grow and finding all those other issues, like and then learning the different aspects. Like everyone has their niche and everyone has their value that they bring to a GP team, whether it's raising money, whether it's planning, whether it's operations, whatever your niche is. Um, Everyone has has a voice and should bring that up. But also at the same point, like it's a great opportunity to learn, and that's why I did this Alaska deal so that I can learn from some people who are really good at stuff and understand like okay when on my next deal now I have this little nugget of knowledge and I'm gonna use that, and then that nugget's going to continue to grow and continue to grow, and then I'll rinse and repeat, and try to same thing when I put the next team together. It's all right. Here's what I want to focus on this. Okay, so now I can focus on, if I'm trying to leverage everything I learned from property management or asset management on this one, now I can leverage it to this. And maybe I can find a younger person who has some construction experience, maybe just not multifamily, and we can have them kind of run that side of it. So I can focus on the other one, and then everybody continues to grow as a team and works together.
Yeah, it's definitely a team sport, and
Yeah,
I'm also learning a lot working with some more experienced people, and it's big to for me. It's huge to have that experience to leverage, and I just learned so much from the others on the team. And I have been getting to capital raising, which is something I think that's where we met is in it's like the
that's
chat. So the middle class millionaires capital raising kickoff, and I
yes,
think that's a very valuable skill, and it's even more so going into this. I feel like going into this next year with a lot of there's a lot of, I guess, what would be the right word for it, in the multifamily space. A lot of investors are probably going to lose money, so I think that's
yeah,
going to be a very valuable skill to have. What are your thoughts on that?
100%. I think a lot of people got in over their head. I mean, you're already starting to see people that are going to be banned from never be able to do, especially on the syndicator side, never be able to do syndications again, or no one will want to touch. I mean, like there's the guy in Houston, I can't remember his name, but um, he was one. He's going to go to jail. He was lying to investors, saying that he lost money from a earnest money deposit that went hard. That instead it was actually he was taking money. He was finally realized he got to the point where um, he was taking the money, recognized the loss to try to save other properties that those investors weren't in, and then it was lying to the thing. But you're 100% right. There's people who got into deals when the tide was coming, when the tide was rising, and had they been able to sell it in 21, early 22, or even maybe even late 22, it wouldn't be an issue. But now we're seeing a tremendous amount of delinquencies that are starting to hit the market, whether it's foreclosure, and much like the housing market of 2008 to 2012, where it wasn't necessarily smart to buy, but we did. We got told we were crazy for that. We were stupid, and it wasn't until we did like our fourth or fifth flip where we were making like $15,000 to $20,000 of profit after taxes that people started being like, "Hey, I want to do that." Right? And so it's the same thing. Like when and I yeah, I'm an investor in stocks, options, crypto, right? Like when I'm starting to be greedy is when I start to be like, okay, Ben, let's sell. We're not going to take on any more longer term position. Now we're going to look at shorting the market. And it's the same thing when everyone's selling is a great opportunity to buy. And I think if you can come in and you can get on the right team with people, and you leverage your value, and I think it's easier, right? Like for me, right, I'm never going to be, or maybe who knows, as of right now, I'm never going to be the big capital raiser. I'm just not. Like I know my weaknesses. I know what I bring to the table. But if I can bring 250K or 500K to a deal and bring the other knowledge, like if they're apples to apples, you and me comparing hypothetically, we both have the same construction experience. We both have very similar project management, all those experiences, and I can bring 500K to the table and you can bring 100K. Who's the team going to pick? Right? So it's just you have to, and it goes back to leadership. You have to know. You don't have to be an expert, but you have to know kind of each individual areas, right? Like when I was going back to when I was a Green Beret, I was the only officer on a team. It was a 12-man special forces detachment. I had people who specialized in um, weapons, construction and demolition, medical and communications, and then intelligence and then planning. So I leverage each individual person based on their expertise. I learn from them, but I was never the expert, right? Like I was good with foreign weapons, but I was never the expert that one of my weapons sergeants was, because that wasn't my job. But my job was to, my expertise was to planning, risk mitigation, and then being that orchestrator of chaos when bullets start flying. So it's the same thing. It's making yourself more marketable to the team, whether it's capital raising, asset management, property management, construction, and then it's continuing to grow and develop. And like maybe, like me, I eventually want to get into developing, but as I'm looking at, okay, what's my short-term goals is I want to get more properties where I have a bigger piece of the GP team, and then I can, once I have that cash flow, then I can focus on taking a little bit more risk on the development side.
Yeah, I want to touch on something you said at the beginning there about being. I like the Warren Buffett quote, like be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. That's kind of the hard thing about like when other people don't want to get into it. Is probably a sign that it's a good time to.
Yeah.
It's a good time to buy.
And that's again, it's life experience, right? That's known over time. Like knowing me, like, okay, am I going to miss out? Sure, right? Like, will there be deals that I miss out on because, my what my buy box is? Yes, I'm going to miss out on deals, but I'm not going to lose sleep over that. And kind of like Michael Jordan. I grew up, with Michael Jordan. He always took that other shot because not because of fear of missing, because he wanted to win and that competitiveness. And I'm gonna, like if I underwrite a deal and you underwrite a deal and it just doesn't work for me, or the price that if it's I come up with a $6 million and you come up that you can make it work at 6.5 or $7 million and they sell to you, I'm not gonna lose sleep over that because I established what I felt fair market value was for that. And I'm not gonna go into a thing where everything has to go right. Right? I've been in those situations in previous line of work where the probability of being successful is very low. Versus, and again, I'm not trying to be. I'm not swinging for home runs every time. I want ones that can cash flow, that give at least 6 to 8% cash on cash a year, and ideally, I can double my investors' money every 5 years, right? And will deals come across? Yes, but if I were exclusively hunting for home runs, where it's a 2-year deal, I can double the money, I can pay 12, 14% pref to my investors. Those aren't going to come along every day, and you're going to be dealing with a tremendous amount of disappointment when you're underwriting somewhere. Several of my mentors have told me that it's like 1 in 7,500 or 1 in 10,000 is a home run. But it goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier with the failures that are going to be coming as indications. You're going to have to build your reputation, and then more people will find out and say, hey, I want to invest with Kyle, or I want to invest with Ben because yeah, they have this reputation. And if you have the investors, they'll say, hey, yeah, Ben's a straight shooter, always says, hey, we had this issue where the GP team has come up with a solution. If it costs more than that than what we've set aside for this property, we'll have to do a capital call. Is it ideal? No. No one wants to do a capital call. But I think just building that relationship and having those hard conversations with the investors and having, again, going back to what I'm soon to be uh, on my soapbox for planning and thinking through all the issues. You it takes time, but doing the right thing and taking care of investors, it'll pay dividends in the long run.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that, and I think we're kind of getting towards. Wow, this time has flown. We're at 45 minutes already. But, man, I really appreciate it. I do like to always kind of close with a few questions. Um, Books. What kind of books have you read that had a big impact on you? Maybe 2 or 3 that you can think of off the top of your head.
Oh man, I've read so many books. For real estate, I'm trying to remember the name of it. I can't remember the name, but I would say for everybody, Art of War by Sun Tzu. Like you can get the quick, like the short, almost like Cliff Note version of it, but understand like how it impacts life. Um, you referenced 12 Strong, or it used to be called Horse Soldiers. That talks about leadership. You could read, like you could read several of the Sills. I mean, I think there's a mindset or mentality of it's very common and soft, but David Goggins' book or anything by Admiral McRaven, they're all like as far as like leadership books um, or going back to old business books, Good to Great, um, how to gain friends and influence people. Like there's a lot of good books about there, but at the end of the day, I think understanding you is equally important as learning other things. And sometimes you can't do it in a book.
Yeah,
Reading is important, but like knowing what drives you, knowing what pushes you. Like read Simon Sinek's any of Simon Sinek's books. I've learned a tremendous amount. Everything from leadership to and further explanations, right? Like I love Simon Sinek's. Like it's always fun to me. Like he spends his entire or most of his stuff is about the military, like, and then like transferring it to corporate America. But the funny thing, like in the military, like going through certain challenging events as a future leader, like say at West Point, like you didn't know the purpose of why you're doing that. You're just like, oh, okay, whatever. This is X. Same as like Ranger School or the Special Forces Qualification course or whatever. Like as you get more older and more experienced, your myopic vision starts as you've had experience, right? Like tunnel vision starts to open up and you're starting to see things like, oh, this is right. Like in the military, we use, or at least in the army, we use sleep and food deprivation as like a way to accelerate it. In the Navy, like in the SEAL community, they use water and potential drowning to kind of like break people. And Hell Week, obviously, they use sleep deprivation. But it's just kind of like seeing those people kind of in your worst environment. And so if you've never like went say elk hunting or hiked with weight on your back, it's going to learn that. But as you do it and as you put in the reps, you get better. And you're like, okay, now it took me a while to figure out. And I grew up hunting as a kid and spending time outdoors. But like I had to learn how to do like the military version of backpacking, right? And I got better at it, and I got really, really, really good at it but it just took time and understanding and like knowing your strengths and weaknesses. So, yeah, there's a ton of great books out there, but also you gotta like learn you.
yeah. I'm kind of in this phase of that, like trying to really get to know myself, and it takes some asking some hard questions. Like it's, but it's a good exercise, and it's been good for me so far. So appreciate you sharing that. And one, I guess, the final question: if you had to start over your career over, is there anything you would do differently? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, no, I think it goes back to trying to live in the future, live in the moment, plan for the future. Yeah, like you learn from the past, but you can't let it shape you because if you're constantly looking backwards, you're missing out on stuff in the future. And I try to tell my kids, like this, like like they'll be walking backward. We'll be out on a hike. They'll be walking backwards and run into something. I always, learning point, teaching point of like, hey, look where you're going, not where you've been. Yes, you need to let it help shape you and grow from it, but focus on the path and where you want to be. No, I wouldn't change anything. People always ask that. Like, I learned a tremendous amount from every experience, every conference, everything I've ever gone to. I try to always find one positive thing, one gem, and then find how I can learn that. Like, yes, I um, does what I did in the military directly transfer over? Maybe 50, 60, 70%, but it's identifying like, okay, how do we do intelligence? How do we do these things? How do we study a map um, that I did in combat and translate it and refine it to, okay, now how do I study a map of an NSA when I'm looking at great areas? I'm looking at crime. I'm looking at population growth. So I'm looking at all these other things. Like I'm not looking at where they're going to put improvised explosive device in IED. But I'm looking at, okay, where are the crime rates? And is the crime growing or shrinking from an area? And if it's shrinking from an area and when you look at like the path of redevelopment in cities, like, okay, how can I find a place that during this 3 to 5 year hold, it's going to be a value add property. It's going to be in the path of redevelopment, so that I'm getting essentially free money just by ability to kind of predict the future path of that area. Are we right all the time? No, but it's, again, it goes back to having those plans, and things change and politics change and leadership of cities changes, but it's trying to forecast all those things and put it together for the best possible outcome.
I like how you tie in, like the analogies, like from military to investing. That's good. And I think, like, I like what you said about not changing anything. I also think that God has us in a season for a reason, and He knows what's best for us. So just accepting that and enjoying the moment and learning
Yeah.
from it, moving on. So I really appreciate you joining me today. It was a great conversation, and I learned a lot, and I enjoyed it, and really appreciate you joining me.
Well, thanks, Kyle. I appreciate your opportunity to be on the show. And yeah, I mean, like if people want to reach out or have questions, or like you mentioned my website, sportsmenforwarriors.org, if you want to donate, or if you know a veteran that could benefit from our, or even active duty or first responder, they could benefit from what we do, it'd be great. Or if you want to, talk real estate or talk multifamily, or or just have a beer and talk about world politics, whatever it is. So look forward to it.
Awesome. I will drop those some links in the description, so people can reach out to you, and definitely go and see what Ben is doing. It's been, well, I hadn't known you before today, but it's been good to get to know you and see
Yeah.
what you're doing. So, well, with that, I guess we'll end it here. But yeah, thanks for joining me, and thanks for watching.